VIII said to one of his wives, I forget which one, I won't keep you long.
I love it. Great to be with you. This is something else, isn't it?
You know, Mark Lowry told me, I forget, 25 years ago, we were on a plane. He said, Bill, you need to look at this box. It's called a computer. This is your future. Well, he got into it pretty quickly. And I know that, I know you got into it pretty quickly. But boy, I know the computer gets blamed for a lot of bad stuff, but thank God for the computer in these days for us to do what we're doing here now. This is amazing.
That is. It really is.
Okay. I want the world to know one of my very favorite CDs, I still play CDs in my car, is this instrumental album by this fine man. Now, I claim to be a little bit of a historian in our business. I don't think we've ever had a better melody writer ever in the Christian music field. A lot of great melody writers. But I do love your melodies, Michael. And when I hear your melodies, I know one thing. I know you came from West Virginia, and you must have been listening when you were a kid to some of those fiddle harmonics and some of those melodies. And did you have classical training on the piano?
You know what? I really didn't have classical training. I learned, I was not a very good sight reader. I learned the Bach invention because I just made myself learn. I could play by ear, Bill, and so much more fun.
Yeah.
Making up melodies and playing Beatles songs so I could hear things and actually play them back.
Yeah.
And so when it came to reading music, it was just a lot. It was more work, so I kind of wimped out, unfortunately. So, but I have a love for Handel's Messiah and Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. And,
yeah.
So
Well, for the record, Gloria and I buy very few tickets, but we bought 2 tickets to come to the Schermerhorn Symphony Hall to see you. So you evidently have some kind of sophistication in music. Here you were playing with this symphony, and they were looking at you like, I mean, they were in such admiration of your talent and what you did. And I think it's one thing for us, and I have nothing but respect for the gospel songwriters because I grew up listening to Stuart Hamlin and Ira Stanfield, Mosey Lister, and the Fanny Crosby hymns. But I think it is quite another thing because we are all who we are because of the things we heard when we were kids. I heard you mention the word Beatles, and that's part of the stuff that went in our ears, right?
Yeah.
And evidently, probably some of the bluegrassers from West Virginia, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And you put all that stuff together, and you've got a Michael W. Smith who comes up with all of these beautiful melodies. This particular, for anybody who's listening, this particular album is totally instrumental. Most of the time, when we hear something instrumental and we are moved by it emotionally and spiritually, it's because we associate it with a lyric, like a great hymn, great is thy faithfulness, or how great thou art, or something that we got a lyric to. I got to tell you, my friend, I don't want to blow too much smoke, but I got to tell you, you create worship with just melodies and harmonics. Then you put and then you put a lyric to it, and it is something else. So I'm saying all of that to say, I'm talking to you today as a fan, my friend. We love to when we get a big speaker and turn it up as loud as we can turn it up and hear that great stuff. The project is called Glory, and maybe it's a little bit of a commercial, but
2011 is when that record came out. So
What'd you say?
9 years ago, that record came out. 9 years, but I think it's 2011. Freedom came out in 2000, and then I did the Glory record. So I just love writing that stuff, Bill. I just, it all happened when I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I saw it. I saw it 28 times at the movie theater. I couldn't believe it, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. I saw it that many times, but I realized the 14th time going back to see it, it was not Spielberg and the character Indiana Jones who I fell in love with. I kept going back because of the music. Yeah. It was the music of John Williams. And ever since I saw that movie, I've been writing cinematic music ever since I became this huge fan of John Williams, and I have everything he's ever done. And so it's just kind of part of who I am. I find myself writing those kind of melodies more so than anything else that I do. And I love it. And sometimes it's just for me. But, I got to a point where I had so much of this stuff that, I went to Providence with the reunion, says, you got to let me do this record or I'm going to lose my mind, because this is a part of who I am. And they were very much against it. Honestly, nobody's going to buy it. You're the guy who sings Friends, I think I even said, if you don't let me do this record, I'm just going to quit and get another job. I was kidding, but they finally just, hey, just go do it. Go do the Freedom record. And I did. And I'm so glad I did. It's brought me some work. I've scored some movies. It's been fun. But that's a special one. I'm glad you like it. So,
the real writer is going to write. I don't care if anybody else hears it. You have just got to write it, and you've got to get it out. I was talking to Larry Gatlin the other day, and he said he was talking to a young friend who had come to Nashville and been there for 4 or 5 years and had got a contract. She was a singer-songwriter, and she did everything she knew how to do, and the record company finally gave up on her and said, I guess it's just not going to work because we can't get this connected with anything. And in talking to Larry, she said, and she was depressed and she was really discouraged. She said, I'm quitting. I'm done. I'm leaving town. And Larry said, you're doing what? I'm done. I'm leaving. Are you a songwriter? She said, yes. Well, where are you going to turn in your heart? Is that a great question? You don't have any choice. I don't have any choice, because until I'm dead, I'm not going to turn in my heart and just simply say, I'm not going to do this anymore, right?
Exactly. We keep doing it. And I'm having fun, Bill. I really am. I'm still writing, and I feel like my best work is yet to come. I just feel the wind is at my back, and I'm having more fun maybe than I ever have, So, and this whole thing of this, whatever you want to call it, the plague, and this has forced us into some uncomfortable circumstances. But I find myself so creative during this time. It's crazy. I mean, and maybe I've learned a lot about myself, Bill, during this time. That I think I've wasted a lot of time. It could be in a consumer thing, or you move and you spin and you go and you just keep going, and then all of a sudden you're not going. And I'm actually on this podcast with you from my guest house. That's the first time I've ever set up my studio in my guest house, and I'm literally just writing every day and just loving it. And so there's a lot of good that's come out of this unprecedented time that we're in, for sure.
You sent Gloria a melody the other day. She played it for me, and I just shake my head because Gloria and I wrote probably 400 or 500 songs, basically with the two of us. Somewhere along the way, I told her, your lyrics are better than my music, because I've always been limited music. I consider myself a pretty good producer and writing a certain style of thing. But the copyright people say that we have written maybe 100 songs or more. I don't keep up with that. But a lot of the last 200 or 300 songs have been Gloria's lyrics, with either me co-writing with somebody else, or just somebody like you. You sent her a melody, and she heard it, and she said, "What do you think, Phil?" And I said, "Well, you're asking the wrong person, because I love what Michael does with melodies and the harmonics that he builds around a melody." So, so I encouraged her. I said, you need to come up with a lyric that is worthy of that music. And she wrote a thing with this.
It's fabulous. It's incredible.
Yeah, with this safe. What is it called? Safe in place or whatever.
Yeah. I have to pull it up. Yeah, it's incredible. It's based on Psalm 91.
Based on Psalm 91.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. Scriptures inform us and instruct us, and many times inspire us. But enter the artist, because most of us are dealing with the translators of the King James version, which is probably the most artistic one. But enter the artist with these truths, with a lyric and with the music to go with it. And you come up with things like "A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing," which comes totally out of the Psalms,
right.
But rephrased for this particular generation.
Yeah.
I can remember you when you came to Nashville. Bob McKenzie and I were in a little company together, and this new kid comes in from West Virginia. Mac had an ear and an eye for new talent.
Yeah.
Bob McKenzie did. Yeah. And he said to me, "This kid's good. You ought to write with him." And you came up to the house for a couple, 3 days.
Thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Stayed in the stayed in the guest house. We still have the A-frame there. That would have been 19, probably either 1980 or 81. I just remember it was January, and I flew up to Indianapolis and rented a car, and I think I spent 3 days there with you.
We we're in the right place at the right time, meeting in obedience to his word. I think that was our little attempt at Broadway, because I could see that last in the right place, at the right.
Have a little bit of what do you call them? The Rockettes.
The Rockettes.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, we wrote some songs, "Unshakable Kingdom," and some of those things we wrote back in the day. And I really am excited about sending Gloria some more music. So I really do like this piece of music. Chaz said to me, my manager, which you've known for a long time, he said, nobody writes hymns anymore. Nobody. I mean, that's not true, but for the most part, nobody. What about him? He just kind of planted something inside of me, and I couldn't shake it. So this is like 3-4 months ago in my great room, I wrote that melody. And when I finished it, I thought, I'm going to send this to Gloria. So, and she did. She wrote it. It's a great lyric, and so I'm going to hopefully get a demo out. Let's see if somebody wants to record it. But it's really, really well. The lyric is great. I love it. Yeah.
You speak of hymns. I think it's interesting during any kind of crisis, we all come back to the basics. In fact, all of our lives, especially as we get older, is, okay, what do I hang on to? What do I let go? Because you just can't keep adding and adding and adding without saying, Gloria and I have been married 57 years. And like any marriage, there have been times when, we were going at it. I don't mean physically, but disagreeing. And it's always been over two things: priorities. What are we spending our time on? She'll say, "Why did you tell him you'd do that?" Has your wife ever said that to you? Why
Yes.
are we doing this? In our case, it's not always the case, but it was how we were handling the kids, because there's always one too tough and there's always one not tough enough. If we could have had a problem solver we would have had the perfect as far as relationships are concerned. But after 57 years of living together, and I told you the other day, the sociologists were right in college. They said, marry your best friend. And in our case, our kids are all gone. And it's just me and you, babe. We were just there every night. We prayed, and we said, aren't you glad we married our best friend?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I'm saying all that to say times like this kind of gets us to say, okay, what's really important? What are we going to hang on to?
Yeah.
And what are we going to let go? And I think it's interesting. I think people are picking up the hymn book again and saying, hey, that great is thy faithfulness, Lord. That's a pretty morning by morning, new mercies. All that I needed, thy hand hath provided. They're saying, that's a pretty good song, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in watching that Ken Burns special on country music, Gloria and I watched all 16 sessions. Mm-hmm. It still comes back to songs, and songs that dig in and relate to people.
Yeah, I agree.
So these are not totally bad times.
I don't think so.
Because it's a wonderful thing to see what we're made of. You and I were at I think one of the most interesting places I've ever been, in a tent 2 years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina, when, if the face on Christianity is, when the history is told of the 20th century, it would be the face of Billy Graham. And to be honored, you were asked to sing a special, and I was asked, or the vocal band was asked to do Because He Lives. And remember, we were sitting there with only 500 people. They limited it to 500 people. Yeah. And you and I said, let's pinch each other, make sure that this is really, can you believe growing up in Appalachia, me growing up in a cornfield in Indiana, here we are at this patriarch of the faith. Oh, I know. With respect, like probably no Christian has ever had in our field, Mm-hmm. Never compromised his message. His message was very simple. Yeah. The cross, the importance of the cross in our lives. It's a beautiful service, wasn't it? It was. It was freezing cold, but it was beautiful. That's the other thing. Remember we said, have you ever been this cold in your life? It was cold. And we were going to be on camera, so we wouldn't dare to put an overcoat on, right? Right. No, it was beautiful, Bill. I'll never forget it. I mean, it was, I didn't sing my song very well, above all. That's what he wanted me to sing. And I was just grateful to get through it, Yeah, I was a great friend. He was a great friend. And you always know it's going to happen. He'd always bring it up to me when I would spend time with him in his cabin or in his home. I'd go up there and play for him. And he'd say, I'm ready to go home. I'd say, well, I would say things like, that's not your call. I kind of like you being around. But you don't, and then you watch him suffer in the last 2-3 times I was up there, I found myself praying for him instead of him praying for me, because he didn't have any energy, which was so surreal. And you do want him to go home. But when you get the call that he did go home,
I cried for a week, Bill. I just,
Mm.
because there's nobody like him. He really was. He was a rare individual who had this thing about him where everybody loved him, even if you didn't believe in God. You admired the man. It was something on him, his demeanor, the way he communicated, that you just couldn't help but love him. And maybe that's why I was so attracted to him. I want to be that way. I want people to look at me and say the same things. You know what I'm saying? So there was
Yeah.
just so many. And I know he had his faults, and he would tell me some of those things. But hey, and we all do. But boy, there was something extraordinary about him, and I still miss him. And nobody, I don't know if there's anybody that will fill his shoes. Maybe we're all supposed to fill his shoes. It was, as it was said at the funeral. Maybe we're all supposed to be Joshua's and carry the torch. But I miss him. But that was a great day, and I was honored, and I know you were too. And it was a moment in time for me. It really was.
Billy was like the guy who said, you know what? I don't know how to explain to you what integrity is, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
And I think you could say a lot of things about him, but you'd have to say integrity. I mean, what you saw is what you got. The last time we were there, I'll never forget, he had his baseball cap on and he was in this study and had pictures of Ruth all around. I mean, everywhere you look, there was a picture. There's a picture of Ruth. And he was at the place where his hearing, it was very difficult for him to hear. Did you find that true the last times you were there?
Oh yeah, he would. The only way he could hear us, he had to put some headphones on.
Yeah.
And then I would talk to him through a tiny microphone so he could hear me. And
Yeah.
so when I would set up my keyboard to play, I'd play all his favorite hymns and just play for an hour. But I would set the little microphone beside the keyboard so he could hear me. Yeah, his hearing was really not good at all. But he could hear me. Even the last time I was there, 4 months before he crossed to the other side, I know he could hear me. He didn't seem to be coherent. Every time I would talk to him, he would kind of give me a little,
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that he knew I was there. And so, but yeah, it's just great times. There's just so many great memories of being with him. So
I remember one time when Gloria and I were up there, as we get ready to leave in the car, he and Ruth came out. Ruth was still alive then. And they sat in those, they had rockers out there right behind there. And you are right in saying a cabin. I suppose there was, there's more room than just in a little cabin. But it was really a mountain home, and it felt so much a home. And I like it because the first time Cliff came into our kitchen, we've got brick on our floor too, and barn beams with baskets. He said, this looks a little bit like Billy and Ruth's kitchen. But when we left one time, we looked back and they were both sitting there with their dogs by their chairs. And Gloria said, we got to get a picture of that. And so we just, we're touring. What can you say when you're at Billy Graham's home? You're a tourist.
Place. Really beautiful place. Just something about being on top of that mountain. Ruth put that whole thing together. It's 3 log cabins that she bought and then just assembled it. And it's, special place.
Did they tell you the story about the night that Muhammad Ali came there? And he stayed one night, but he was supposed to stay 3 nights. But it's not the most plush place in the world.
Right.
So he just stayed there. He just stayed. Those are great stories. And then Bev. What a hoot. I was up there one time because he lived in a house on the way up to that house. Yeah. And so he said, Bill, you want to get some catfish? I said, yeah. I made a mistake. I got in his, I think it was a truck or an RUV or something like that. Have you ever ridden with him driving?
No,
with Bev driving?
But I know him in a car or him in a boat.
Oh my lands! I mean, he drove like I rededicated my life 2 or 3 times going around.
I think one of the last times I saw, well, it wasn't the last time. I think he had just turned 100, and he just said, "You got to come and see my boat. I just bought me a boat." I mean, he's 100 years old.
I know.
Who does that? What a great man. I'll tell you. Yeah, and I was very fortunate to be in his home a few times. But what a great man. What a great guy. Tell you what. And he lived a long life. I mean, it's a long life.
A long, long life. I interviewed him when he was and very, very smart. Yeah. To the very end. I interviewed him when he was 99. I said, Bev, this is your 99th birthday. He said, yes, or it could be 66 turned upside down.
Awesome.
He thought, the story that I took away from that funeral that day, Franklin wanted that service to be an hour and 15 minutes.
Yep.
And he had it planned pretty much down to the T because he knew there would be a national television audience. And he wanted all the kids to say something. And I think most of them did. Maybe Ned didn't, but most of them did. But the story that stuck in my mind was Ruth, who in her own words, basically said, I was a prodigal, in a lot of, made some mistakes in 2 marriages. And I wrote and said, Dad, is it okay if I come home? And he said, sure, come home. But when she described circling that mountain, which you have done many times, and coming around that last corner, she said, it's one thing to disappoint God. And it's another thing to disappoint your father. But when your father is Billy Graham, that's quite another thing. And I didn't know what I'd see. And I turned the last corner. There he was, just like the biblical story with his arms open.
That's the moment I remember from the service as well. Powerful.
You and I have been blessed.
Absolutely.
I watched the service at the Capitol, and I heard the keyboard, and I heard you singing, and friends are friends forever. If the Lord is the Lord of them, and a friend will not say never, because a welcome will not end. Though it's hard to let you go, in my Father's hands we know that a lifetime is not too long to live as friends. And I was proud of you, my friend.
Thank you, Bill.
I told Gloria, that's a perfect song and the perfect guy to sing it.
Very blessed, very grateful.
Yeah. Michael, you and I have been blessed, and I know you're busy, and for you to take this time of day, it's just a blessing me.
Love it. Enjoyed every minute. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Love you, my friend.
Love you as well.